Welcome to the course PR for Startups. I'm your instructor. My name is Dekker Fraser. One of the central key themes in this course is that PR is easy. Now, you might think it's overwhelming to pitch something like CNN or the New York Times, and it seems insurmountable. But in reality, PR is as easy as sending an email. So to give you a quick example of where I did this was I did a quick search on Google for top Udemy instructors. This is a position that I want to hold. I want to be known as one of the top Udemy instructors. And I saw this website that lists the 15 plus top Udemy instructors. I went on it and I realized I wasn't there, even though I had tons of enrollments, a lot of high ratings, etc. So all I did was I wrote the person that managed the page. Contact information was right there. And before you knew it, I was listed as one of the top Udemy instructors. And you can see here, marketing instructor Dekker Fraser is at number 10. And there's even a link back to my profile on Udemy. So this demonstrates how quick and easy PR can really be with small businesses, with startups, with early stage companies. It doesn't need to be something that requires hiring a PR agency, investing a lot of money, investing a lot of time. It can be as simple as just getting started with an email. Now, I'm going to give you another example where it's slightly more complicated to do the PR, but it's really not that much to do. So, what I was doing was I was leading the marketing for a Google Accelerator startup. And we were marketing software, dictation software for veterinarians, veterinarian clinics, etc. Now, the way that I approached the marketing for this company was I said, why don't we find out who has the most influence among veterinarians and we'll do our marketing through that. So I went to this tool called SparkToro, which was started by the same person that started SEO Moz, which was later rebranded as Moz, which you may be familiar with. And I put in here, my audience uses these words in their profile, veterinarian, and then it spits out a list of publications, influencers, brands, YouTubers, podcasts, etc., that are very influential around veterinarians. So, for example, podcast was a strong focus, and that was a micro campaign that I ran, reaching out to the people that were the hosts on podcasts for veterinarians. And you can see that this particular one, according to SparkToro, influences about 20% of the audience. That's pretty sizable. Okay, so what did I do? I offered the top influencers, in this case, the top podcasters, but we're also talking about people that run blogs, that publish books, all different types of media. And I said, we're going to give you a perpetual VIP account for the software. And because a lot of these influencers are veterinarians, they're going to find that useful. And because they're podcasters, they're also going to find it useful because any sort of audio related equipment is going to be useful for them. So, dictation software in this case, and also a microphone. So, giving them a perpetually free account, also giving them a white glove training experience where we get on with them on a live call to demonstrate how to use the software, how to use the hardware, etc. And for select people that had a lot of clout, we even mailed them a dictation microphone, a high end Philips microphone to make sure they had the best possible experience using the software. And so not only did we raise our awareness among the people that have the most influence with veterinarians, but the next thing that we did was we were able to become podcast guests on their podcast. So that gives us a lot of reach, that gives us a lot of publicity. So this is a very simple approach to PR. It's not something overwhelming where you need to get all worked up about an interview on a news channel or getting a perfect press release or anything complicated like that. It's basically just sending emails or in some cases an Instagram message, a Facebook message, etc., giving giving away some stuff for free and then offering to provide free content for their channel. And this was a very successful PR campaign that I ran for a Google Accelerator startup. So, one of the key lessons from this case study on PR is that it's easier to borrow an established audience, an established influence, than it is to start from scratch. So, when you're a startup, you don't have a lot of brand recognition, you don't have a lot of clout, nobody knows who you are. So, it's easier to just piggyback off the people that do. In this case, these were podcasters, influencers, publications, etc., and working with them, building a relationship with them. That is the basis of what PR can be for your startup as well. So the other thing I want to say is the focus here is on startup PR. And there are certain key advantages that you have as a startup that large companies don't. And one of those key advantages is that you can take bigger risks. So, to demonstrate this, I want to highlight what happened with Bud Light. Now, Bud Light raised a lot of controversy because they aligned themselves with this controversial influencer, a trans influencer, whose face was put on the Bud Light cans. A lot of people started boycotting the product, and a lot of publicity was generated from this, good or bad. And one of the reasons that Bud Light perhaps was able to take this big risk was because you had a brand that was in decline. And when something's in decline, you're more inclined to take risks, to resurrect it. But usually, when you're dealing with big brands or big companies, they don't want to take risks. They have something to lose. They have brand equity, they have equity on their balance sheets. But when you're a startup, you don't have anything. So there's nothing to lose. That means that the advantage you have is you can take much bigger, bolder bets because nobody knows who you are. You have no reputation, you have no assets, you have nothing to lose, and you can't go negative unless you go into debt. So really, this is the strategy that you should be taking with your PR. Your PR is big, bold, risky bets. Because that's going to help you generate a lot of buzz, generate a lot of awareness, etc. Other key advantage is the David versus Goliath stories. People love underdog stories. Underdog stories are more likely to be picked up by the media. So you can really piggyback off of that. And a large brand is not going to have an easy time being able to tell that story. And later in the course, we'll get into details about storytelling elements and different ways to craft your message. Now, the other thing is you can be more creative. You can also be much more faster with putting things out. So you can come up with creative responses to trends that are happening, whereas a giant company not can't necessarily do that because it's like moving the Titanic. It's a very slow, cumbersome process. There's a lot of political approvals that need to go through VPs, etc. So it's very hard to do things that are creative and bold. It's also very hard to do things that are fast. Small, agile companies with a CEO or the head of PR, the head of marketing can just stamp something right away and approve it. You can get it out the door with something that's going to get a lot of attention. Now, the other key advantage you have over large companies is that you can focus on a hyper niche, a very narrow audience, a very narrow product category, and you can concentrate all your effort on that. Now, I was recently talking to Bruce Greenwald, who's one of the most renowned business professors at Columbia Business School. He's known for analyzing value investors like Warren Buffett, very intelligent man. And what he was saying was that with startups, often really what you need to do is take a very narrow product range or very narrow product category. And that's really the only way that you can be operationally efficient because often startups don't benefit from real economies of scale. They're not benefiting from customer captivity either. So competitive advantages strategically often don't exist with startups. But what does exist is operational efficiency, which often comes from having very hyper focused attention on certain types of things. Whereas with big companies need big markets, they need big growth, they need to start expanding in different directions. And what that means is they lose their focus. So as a startup, you can kind of dominate the conversation, dominate the PR around a narrow scope. And that's going to be great for you. It's going to have a big impact for you, but it's not big enough for the big companies because it's just a drop, a pebble in the ocean of their financials. So your big problem as a startup is really that nobody's ever heard of you. You have a huge awareness problem. Now, a lot of people in startup marketing don't really get this. Often they're timid, they're conservative, they're worried about losing, they're worried about their reputation, they're worried about their brand. That's the opposite approach that you need to have because your big problem is not what people think of you, like what your reputation is, what your positioning is. It's really that nobody's thinking about you at all. People are thinking about Nike all the time, they're thinking about Apple all the time. They're not thinking at all about your startup. So anything that you can do that generates huge awareness that puts you on the map is probably worth pursuing because it's going to overcome that huge hurdle of lack of awareness. So what does that mean? That means you can take risks. Because if you take risks, let's say you cold email a journalist at the New York Times and you're worried, oh, what if he doesn't like it? Am I being too aggressive? Am I blah, blah, blah? You got to wipe your mind out of that because tomorrow they're going to forget all about you. Why? Because you have no awareness. So take those risks, do anything you can to try to raise that awareness in ethical ways, of course. The other thing I want to say is that PR is a circus. So what you want to do is you want to put on a show, you want to put on a spectacle, kind of like I have here with Cirque du Soleil. It's not really about substance. So there are a lot of PR choices, and as a business person, as an MBA trained manager, I'm looking at a lot of the stories that come out, and I'm like, well, that doesn't make sense. Why are they focusing on that? That's a tiny market. Well, the reason they're doing those things is to put on a show, to get media attention, because the media attention is very valuable. So it seems some of the PR choices seem highly irrational. They don't align with the product positioning. But when you think about it in terms of media attention, it makes absolute sense. So I want to give you an example. Sometimes companies like Oreo or brands like Oreo, they'll come up with these flavors that perhaps nobody would ever want, or maybe they'll only try it once. And it's like, well, why would you invest heavily in a brand that is going to be not very popular at all? Well, the reason is to get publicity, right? A big, bold new flavor is going to get a lot of media attention. When Heinz released purple and weird colored ketchups, I don't know how well it did. Probably not very well because I don't see it on the store shelves anymore. But I'm sure it probably got a lot of immediate attention because it was new, it was exciting, it was a spectacle. So, really, what happens when Oreo does something like this is it elevates the original Oreo sales, even though nobody may be buying the cherry cola Oreos. But it doesn't matter. Again, PR is the circus. It's about the show, not about the substance. So, as a startup, one of the key things that you really want to do is you want to get creative. And I want to give you a few very specific examples of this. One is you can make your own ranking. So, I'll give you an example of me doing this growth hacking approach when I was younger. I probably wouldn't do it today because it's a little bit suspicious. But what I would do was I would run PPC ads for a web design agency that I was running, PPC, Google, Bing ads. And instead of sending them to my landing page or my homepage, what I did was I created a list of the top web design firms, the top 10 web design firms. And I put my company, I think, at number one or number two. And then, of course, people are already believing that this is one of the top web design agencies. Now, I'm not recommending you do this, but this is when I was younger, I was a little more creative and experimental and just sort of hacking things out. And it was very effective. So you can create your own ranking. You can say, we're the best the list of the best cat food brands, the list of the best waterproof pillows, whatever niche that you're in, create a list, own the list, publish a list. Maybe it's an annual thing. So an example of this was US News. US News puts out rankings of colleges and universities, and that's why I ended up at the Kellogg School of Management. It was consistently ranked number one for marketing year after year. But recently, there's been this controversy around how suspicious the ranking methodology is. Yale University and Yale Law School have withdrawn, even though Yale Law School is consistently ranked the top law school. But what this tells you is that lists, they feel secure. They feel like they're objective, but really they're not. They're just something that some organization came up with, and there's no reason that you can't come up with your own list as well. That's a creative thing you can do. Another creative thing you can do is you can invent a special day. So National Whatever Day. National Pet Day, for example, was invented by this person, Colleen Page, who is an animal welfare advocate, and she invented National Pet Day in 2006. There's no reason you can't do that within your niche as well. Another thing that you can do is you can invent your own word. So HubSpot, for example, invented this word, inbound marketing. And it's a word that has spawned many conversations in marketing world today, inbound versus outbound. Personally, I'm a huge fan of outbound marketing. I think it's much more efficient and fast, but inbound marketing is certainly incredibly useful in a lot of contexts. But basically, HubSpot was able to invent a word, own that word, and create a lot of publicity around it. Another example here I saw in the news. Trump warns biggest threat is nuclear warming. So there's a lot of people worried about global warming. So what he's done, or whoever wrote this article has done, is, or wrote his speech, has come up with this idea. Well, let's take this idea that's in people's minds of global warming and apply it to something else, which is the threat of nuclear war with Russia. And so he's coined this phrase nuclear warming, which is an interesting creative way of generating PR. And of course, Donald Trump is a master of PR. And that's one of the reasons he was successful, despite not having as much funding as his competitors. He's able to get uh, the financial benefit of PR of free media attention, which is something you can do as a startup. You don't have a lot of money. Well, you can leverage free PR to generate the equivalent of millions and millions of dollars in advertising. Now, there's a general framework that we're going to use, a formula that we're going to use for this course. And it's a formula I came up with. It's called the 3S formula for startup PR. And those 3S's are soliciting, storytelling, and scaling. Soliciting is basically reaching out to journalists, reaching out to influencers, reaching out to media outlets, and finding out who the people are that you need to contact. The second is storytelling. This is where you're crafting the message. You're coming up with some sort of compelling narrative that's going to resonate with people, and that's going to be valuable for the journalists or the media. And then lastly, we're going to talk about scaling, which is going to comprise a variety of different things, but some of those things are going to be automation. So things like automated cold outreach, and also some tricks like growth hacking and virality. So let's jump into the course and let's continue.